Kamala Harris CNN interview highlights. How did a vice president do in prime time? Hey, let's start with I'm Chris Graham, Augusta Free Press. I've been seeing Dana Bash getting bashed, I guess you could say, for her interview of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz from both sides, as someone in the media, I understand the interviewer's job here is the job of a baseball umpire, of a football or basketball referee. You're wrong no matter what, because fans of either team watching, in the case of where we are in politics today, Democrats are going to, see that you're calling balls out of the strike zone. The Republicans are going to see the same thing. Either in the case of, Dana Bash, she was either too hard, she wasn't hard enough. I'll say it this way. She didn't chum it up with Harris and Walz the way that Fox News and Newsmax do regularly with Donald Trump and JD Vance. So basically, lay off. I think she did what she was supposed to do by and large. I mean, I will raise some quibbles as we go through this. Um, but let's start actually with that. The first question was one that I would quibble with um, because she followed up with a reiteration of it, Dana Bash did. Day one, what are you going to do on day one? And here's the quibble from me, as someone who's covered politics for a long, long time. Um, what you're going to do on day one, other than signing executive orders, you're not going to be able to do much. I mean, you have the transition. Whoever wins on November 5th has the transition time. Obviously set up their government. They're going to, it would be easier for Kamala Harris, let's be honest, if she's inheriting basically the infrastructure of the Biden administration. She'll make some changes. She'll make some changes likely in her cabinet, maybe a few agency heads, but by and large, you're not going to have to do a lot of stuff. But you got that time to do that. You've got the time to reach out. Whatever happens with Congress, um, in terms of the leadership, who has a majority in the House, who has a majority in the Senate, you can start laying the groundwork for whatever you're going to be doing um, legislatively. But day one, you're not going to have laws passed to be able to sign on day one. It's just, so saying, what are you going to do on day one? Whatever. It's just kind of silly. Um, what I'll say then is, kind of an overview now, there were criticisms, and I've seen these from Augusta Free Press readers, from Republican Augusta Free Press readers. Welcome, by the way. Mostly you're coming in through YouTube. Uh, well, Harris didn't talk about policy. What's her position on XYZ issue? Dana Bash didn't ask a lot about policy. She didn't ask about issues a lot. She asked about day one. She did ask about immigration. She asked about Israel, but not Ukraine, not NATO, not China, not Russia. So those are the much more important to American voters' issues than Israel. There was a little bit of talk, if you could say, about Bidenomics, but not about economics. There was a question that Harris seemed to have to ask herself about inflation and the Inflation Reduction Act and things of that nature. Really nothing on healthcare. Healthcare, I don't care who you are. If you're a Republican watching this, you can say it's not important to you, but next time you or someone in your family ends up in the hospital for something, having to go to the doctor, I mean, God forbid, cancer, a car wreck that you have, maybe your insurance company, car insurance company is dawdling on settling the case there. You get stuck with the bills. I mean, health insurance is an important issue. I mean, and nothing about that in this interview. Nothing. I mean, again, Harris had to bring it up herself, and she talked more about the prescription drug part. I mean, if you're going to ask about, if you're going to say she didn't talk about issues, let's blame the interviewer a little bit for not bringing that in there. They had almost that whole hour. They did have some commercial breaks and things like that, but whatever. So that's, I guess I said earlier, don't bash Dana Bash, and now I'm bashing Dana Bash. Um, the economic policy part, I mean, uh, Harris answered talking about inflation the issue inherited from the COVID, last year of the Trump administration. What I would have liked Harris to have said, I guess, is what the answer is that the inflation we're seeing talked about in the media and by Republicans isn't taking into account the decisions made in the final year of the Trump administration by Republicans and Democrats to hand out trillions of dollars in free money to pump up the economy. I mean, I'm not quibbling with that at all. I think that's what we needed to do. But if you're going to print money and then give it away to people, That's going to cause inflation. I mean, there's lots of ways that causes inflation, and it kept us from going into a Great Depression. So congratulations, but yeah, the issue left lingering is inflation. So where Harris answered, I'll kind of gloss over, quote, we'll start with the fact that when Joe Biden and I came into office during the height of a pandemic, we saw over 10 million jobs were lost. We literally were tracking all the numbers. Hundreds of people a day were dying because of COVID. The economy had crashed. He's underestimated. There were thousands of people dying a day at the height of this thing and for months at a time. Just horrible. In large part, that was all because of this mismanagement by Donald Trump of that crisis. Donald Trump didn't manage a crisis well, but I mean, whoever was managing the crisis, there would have been a lot of people dying at the height of that before the vaccines came out. That's the fair way to say that. When we came in, this is, going back to quote, when we came in, our highest priority was to do what we could do to rescue America. And today we know that we have an inflation under 3%. And that's true. A lot of our policies have led to the reality that America recovered faster than any wealthy nation around the world. That's also true. But you are right, prices in particular for groceries are still too high. The American people know it. I know it. And then she talked about how she wants to bring down the price of groceries, and for an example, by dealing with price gouging, which we're hearing from Republicans is a communist policy, even though 37 states, including Texas and Florida, have anti-price gouging laws on the books. So how communist is that? If that's communist, then Greg Abbott's a communist, and Ron DeSantis is a communist, among others, at the state level. Harris here had to ask herself about her housing and healthcare plans, which is failing of Dana Bash's interviews, and some other facts that I think are just worth pointing out from her continued answers on this. The bringing manufacturing back to the United States so that we created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. That's a fact. Bringing business back to America. In that sense, what we have done to improve the supply chain so we're not relying on foreign governments to supply American families with their basic needs. I think we still have work to do there. So I'm not going to say that's not a fact, but it's something that's still being worked on. Let's talk about immigration and border security. Bash asked Harris why it took the administration 3.5 years to implement sweeping asylum restrictions. Harris answered by talking about the bipartisan deal that Trump blocked. And that's fair. That's the bipartisan deal that we heard about back in January, February was blocked by Republicans. It would have put tens of billions of dollars into immigration border security. It would have put border agents on the ground. It would have put immigration judges on the ground, and this would have helped the situation immensely. It also would have, put into federal law things that Biden then later had to write by executive orders mirroring what Trump did in his term in the 2018-2019 era, but those ended up being overturned in court challenges. So, I mean, that's why they were waiting to get a law passed. What I would like to have also seen Harris talk about would be the efforts of the administration to work with Mexico to make it, and Mexico's doing this, they're making it harder for immigrants from countries south of Mexico in Central America, Northern South America, who are fleeing political violence, coming for economic reasons. Mexico is trying to make it harder and has been very successful in making it harder for people to basically get from one side of their country to from the south of their country to the American border. That plus the immigration executive order that Biden signed is why we've seen, just a trickle now of influx of immigrants, since the spring. Harris didn't talk about that. So, to me, that's a talking point that I would have been jumping up and down talking about as far as that goes. One last thing. So again, we didn't get any questions from Dana Bash on, let's see, nothing on healthcare, nothing substantive on the economy, just talk generally about the economy. Nothing about the affordable housing plan that I think is very important. If you're out there watching this, if you're listening to this, I don't care if you're a MAGA out there. Likely you're paying too much rent, you're paying too much for your mortgage. If you're even lucky enough to have a home over your head, I mean, there's a lot of folks out there right now struggling in that respect. And we haven't heard anything from the Trump side on affordable housing. We've heard a lot of detail from the Harris side on that. So, but nothing was asked of her about that. On the foreign policy front, again, nothing on the NATO alliance, which is what's kept us safe and secure for 80 years since World War II. Nothing about the dangers of Russia, North Korea, China. Nothing about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Nothing about that. Nothing about that. But we get a question about, and a few questions about Biden's capacity. This was one where I thought Bash was clearly carrying water for the Trump campaign, been making an issue of Harris standing by Biden's side, even though the media has gone oddly silent since Biden dropped out of the race on the obvious cognitive issues that Trump's going through. And this is where, okay, the MAGA folks, if you stayed this long into this, you can argue with me all you want. The guy's got some issues, okay? And I'm not saying that and laughing about it. I'm saying that I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned for him. I mean, couldn't care less about him, right? But um, concerned for our country if he ends up being our president. He went off. He was asked a question at a town hall yesterday. As I'm recording this on Friday, on Thursday, he was asked a question at a town hall about inflation. He talked about nobody eating bacon and then wind. That was his answer? No, this guy, something's wrong with this guy. But again, okay, so Biden's capacity is an issue. So here was the question. Vice President Harris, you were a staunch defender of President Biden's capacity to serve another 4 years right after the debate. You insisted that President Biden's extraordinarily strong. Given where we are now, do you have any regrets about what you told the American people? Harris gave the right answer. Not at all. I've served with President Biden for 4 years. I'll tell you, it's one of the greatest honors of my career. He cares so deeply about the American people. He is so smart and loyal to the American people. I've spent hours upon hours with him, be it in the Oval Office or Situation Room. He has the intelligence, the commitment, and the judgment and disposition that I think the American people rightly deserve in their president. Now, ask this. I mean, if you ask the same question of the Donald Trump side, Trump himself, but also J.D. Vance, I mean, all the people, the Republicans around him, and let me say, don't just ask the question, demand an answer. You know, saying whether it's J.D. Vance or a surrogate, whoever the case may be, if you ask a question, what about Trump's mental state? What about his age? Will he survive another term? If you ask the question and they say words after that that have nothing to do with that question, that's not answering the question. Make them answer the question. Kamala Harris answered the question here. You may not like the answer, but she answered the question here. She didn't just say words after the answer. So that's the difference here. Again, if you're a MAGA and you stayed this long into this video, that's a huge difference. All the comments I got from folks saying, well, Trump talked to XYZ, CBS News or NBC News or whoever else. He interviewed with them. Okay, an interview isn't asking a question, the interviewer, and then Trump talking off the top of his head about something not related to the question for 2 minutes, and then the interviewer asking another question, and then Trump doing the same thing, talking about something completely off topic for 2 minutes off the top of his head. That's not an interview. That's somebody who needs to be in a home. Okay? That's an interview if you're going to put your grandpa in an assisted living facility. So let's talk about interviews if you want to talk about interviews. Any case, if you have any questions for me, any comments for me, anything else for me, send me an email at chris@augustafreepress.com.